Untangled Viners, welcome back to another captivating episode of Untangled Vines, Redefining the Rules of Work. Today, we're privileged to have a remarkable guest whose entrepreneurial journey is as diverse as it is inspiring. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Amina Moreau. Hopefully I said that right. A visionary entrepreneur with a knack for turning ideas into reality. Over the years, Amina has co-founded and led a variety of successful ventures, each leaving an indelible mark on its respective industry. From the groundbreaking film production company Still Motion, which garnered 5 Emmy Awards, to the innovative storytelling consultancy Sway Storytelling, Amina's track record of excellence speaks for itself. And let's not forget Radious, her latest venture, a revolutionary platform that's transforming the way we think about home office space. Think Airbnb, but for workspaces. Amina's impact extends beyond the business world. As a board member of a community nonprofit and an adjunct professor of the University of Oregon, she's dedicated to giving back and shaping the next generation of leaders. And if that's not impressive enough, she's also a tennis enthusiast because, well, who doesn't love a good game of tennis? So, whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur, a budding innovator, or simply someone with a passion for making a difference, Amina is here to share her wisdom and inspire us all. But before we dive into the conversation, let's give her a warm round of applause to Amina while we run the intro. Hey, Untangled Viners, welcome back to Untangled Vines, Redefining the Rules of Work. Today we have a special guest, Amina, the co-founder and CEO of Radious Pro or Radious. Hopefully you can correct me if I get that wrong. Amina, thank you so much for being a part of the community and being on this episode.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat.
Same here. I've been prepping. I know you've seen the work. So I want to go ahead and dive into it. I like to start with the icebreaker question so we can get to learn a little bit more about you. But I know from your early ventures to your current role as CEO and co-founder of Radious, it's evident that you thrive on challenges and see opportunities where others see roadblocks. I think that's a key characteristic as a founder. But can you share a specific moment or experience that truly highlighted the transformative power of remote and or flexible work for you? And why has it become such a focal point in your career?
There were so many moments, but if I were to choose one, it was probably back in 2016. So well before the pandemic ushered in a new era. And my team and I had been worked in an open office. So there weren't any private offices. There were private rooms that you could sneak off to get a little bit of privacy. There were meeting rooms and stuff like that. But everybody had a desk in an open floor plan. And I was tremendously distracted by all the noise. And anytime I had to have a private conversation, if I had to do a call or something like that, I would have to move my laptop and my whole setup into another room. And then inevitably I'd want to stay in that room because I didn't want to go back to the loud open room. But then I would be taking up a private room that somebody else might need. And eventually I just started staying home one day a week. And not having to struggle with parking also, because our office was in an area of town where you would spend half an hour in the morning just circling looking for a parking spot. And so one day a week I would just work from home and I would let everybody know, if you need me, call me. You can find me in digital in digital realms. And then that one day a week turned into 2, into 3, into 4. And finally, my partner in the next room, he was like, Amina, do you not go to work anymore? And I was like, well, I do work. I just do it from this room instead of that one. And other people started doing that too. And we found that productivity didn't suffer at all. when we needed to be together, we just found ways to be together. And if anything, productivity actually increased because myself personally, but others seemed to be getting what they needed in order to do
Hmm.
their best work. And eventually we started questioning the need to pay for this office that was barely
Yeah.
getting used. And this was pre-pandemic. Now, post-pandemic, Radius doesn't have an office. It's a different company now. The company back in 2016 is a different one. But
Hmm.
Radius, we've been building this team from scratch completely remotely.
Mm.
And when we do need to get together, we book a Radius space and
Yeah.
then we gather. But otherwise, we are working in whatever ways work best for us. And everybody's a little bit different. And so that could mean working from home, from a coffee shop, in a park, in a backyard, at a Radius space. Like there are 1,000 different ways to get work done. And uh, I really love embracing that diversity, honestly.
Same. I mean, obviously, we're both pioneers of the future of work, and I think we should start there. Like with Radius, do you want to tell people about what Radius is and kind of why you started it? And I mean, I think we heard a little bit of the origin story there, but can you tap into that for us too?
Yeah. In a nutshell, Radius is a flex office space platform. So instead of signing a lease that you pay for 7 days a week, even if only you're using it only 1 or 2 times a
Y-
week,
Yeah.
flex office platforms in general allow you to just pay as you go.
Hmm.
The reason that Radius is different is that most other flex office platforms utilize empty commercial space
Yeah.
that you can then rent by the day. We're a little different because we're kind of like Airbnb in the
Hmm.
sense that we activate residential properties as meeting and workspaces. So we'll take homes, apartments, an ADU in someone's backyard. We'll make sure that it's equipped with workplace amenities like whiteboards, stand desks, meeting tables, AV. So you have everything that you would expect in either a conference room or a traditional office, but with all the comforts of home. And then the added benefit that these are right in your employees' neighborhoods. And if you
Hmm.
look at national statistics, the biggest barrier to returning to the office is the commute. And most offices, most co-working spaces, they tend to be downtown, which is far away from where people live.
Hmm.
So by focusing on the residential side of things, residential properties are in residential areas precisely where people live. And so we're aiming to reduce commute times, reduce fossil fuel use, and just make it a lot more convenient for people to get work-life separation and see each other in person by keeping it a little bit closer to home. And
Hmm.
yes, you're right. I did touch on the origin story a little bit. I have a very personal stake in the flexibility of movement because as somebody that personally benefited from having location flexibility, I know firsthand what it can do for people.
Yeah.
But I'm also an Airbnb host. And so
Nice.
from the property side, I know what kinds of pain points come from overnight hosting, and Radius being a day only platform where companies and teams and also individual working professionals will book our spaces for a day of work. They're in by 9, out by 5, and it makes it really easy for homeowners to supplement their income a little bit. It helps with housing affordability
Hmm.
while also providing a great place to work for people that are in your immediate community.
Yeah, and that goes with the trends. I just recently started doing the Future of Work weekly report. So I try to find these different articles that are top of the mind, specifically on future of work. And one of those articles was talking about exactly what you were talking about. Is a lot of people are moving from urban or cities into suburban or rural areas, and this is tapping into that problem of we don't necessarily want to go back into the city because of the commute, because of traffic and all that kind of stuff. What do you say? And I know this isn't on our questions, but what do you say to somebody who's saying, that could harm the economy of the city. How do you look at that type of feedback, or do you receive that feedback?
Well, yes, I've been, I've had a lot of conversations also with city governments about it,
Mm,
because I believe really strongly in revitalizing downtowns. And
yeah.
I don't think that this necessarily needs to be a bad thing for downtowns. The answer I'll give you is twofold. First of all, it's not that people aren't spending money anymore. It's just that
It's
they're
true.
spending it differently and in different
Hmm.
places. And so while, yes, downtowns have suffered as a result of this movement, hopefully temporarily, the
Hmm.
suburbs and the exurbs are seeing a boost. And so the overall economy
Hmm.
isn't really that affected across geographies from a higher level. But if you look at micro geographies, then you definitely are starting to see differences. And so we're seeing a lot of uptick in the suburbs and the exurbs. Nick Bloom, economist from Stanford who studies this stuff, calls
Hmm.
it the donut effect, where it's the outer areas
Yeah.
that are now seeing a boost and the inner areas are finding ways to reinvent themselves. And that brings me to the second point of my perspective, which
Hmm.
is that downtowns need to do more than to just try to force employees back to offices. That ship has
Hmm.
sailed. The genie
Yeah.
is out of the bottle. Certainly, there are some people that still enjoy going to an office, but I don't think it's the majority, and it's not 5 days a week either.
Yeah.
And so, city centers would be wise to think about other ways to activate those empty buildings and to encourage people to come back, whether it's for the restaurants, for art installations, for various new utilizations of those areas that excite people. Because if you look at the
Hmm.
statistics, again, back to the data, while people haven't returned to offices at pre pandemic rates, they have returned to restaurants at pre
Yeah.
pandemic rates and then some, right? So people are leaving their homes, they are doing stuff outside. It's just
Yeah.
that they don't necessarily want to go to a traditional office 5 days a week. So, how can we tap into that new mindset and get people out in the community again, utilizing these areas in a bigger way, just more creatively?
Yeah, 100%. That's what I was thinking about whenever I was reading that article. And I like that you use data, because I think a lot of people who are against the future of work or flexibility or remote work, they're going off of opinion instead, or their gut feeling. I think there was like I can't remember who it was, but there was somebody, I want to say it was like JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, saying like there's not like a real reason why we're coming back into the office. It's just a gut feeling, and that does not bring anybody back into the office, right? It doesn't drive purpose. It doesn't drive any motivation or incentive
Yeah,
there.
it's just the because I said so approach, which, you know what,
Mm.
doesn't work with children, doesn't work with adults.
Yes. And when, you know what's crazy, each time that I have these types of conversations, one of the quotes that comes up is, why don't we treat employees like adults? And
Mm.
it's just so crazy. Like, if people will surprise you if you give them the opportunity to. And so that's why I
Yeah.
love the future of work, and the things that you're doing, the things that I'm doing, and the people around us in our network. So thank you for that perspective and your insights. I'm going to go to section one now, because we got three sections to talk about if we can make it through. I won't hold you to it. But given your belief in the power of storytelling and social change, I wanted to know how or if this intersects with Radius's mission to reshape the future of work. So, one, how do you envision Radius influencing the future of work? I know we've already touched on it a little bit, but drawing from your passion of storytelling and your commitment to empowering others, how do you envision that?
A few ways. There are both social and environmental implications of the way the future of work is taking shape. And I am both proud and very excited to to play a part in shaping that future through Radius, through conversations like this one. Because if people are no longer commuting regularly to a faraway office, that obviously has environmental implications from the commute alone. But also, if these empty buildings are now being repurposed for more environmentally friendly uses, then we're seeing impact on both sides. Did you know that a nearly empty office building burns about the same amount of energy as a full one?
Really? I did not know that.
There isn't the infrastructure to turn the lights off, to turn the HVAC down. All of those systems are still running, regardless of whether people, all of the people are there or just 5% of the people are there. And so there have been several studies out recently that have looked at energy consumption of near empty buildings, and it's a really sad state of affairs. But if we could then activate those spaces or find ways to deactivate them, either way, we're making an impact. And more directly through Radius, by providing office space that is close to home, that isn't in your home, so you can kind of escape once in a while if you want to, then not only are we repurposing a building that maybe would be sitting empty, a house, perhaps that family leaves for the day and maybe they do go to an office and their kids are in school for the day. So that is just sitting there empty during the day. Why not use it? But then if you're walking or biking or maybe driving 5 minutes instead of 50, then that obviously has both environmental implications, but then also social ones. Because now that it lowers the barrier for people who have challenges with commuting, either because they don't have the time, perhaps they can't afford gas prices at the moment, and it mitigates proximity bias. And this is sort of part 2 of my perspective, that it's both environmental and social. And you might have to cut me off because I could talk at length about the proximity bias part.
Keep going.
But, proximity bias is a real thing. The idea that if you're not around, if it's out of sight, out of mind. And so if you are not seeing the boss every day, if you're not around your colleagues, is your work going to be less recognized? And are you at risk of being passed up for growth opportunities and promotions in your organization because some other guy is being seen just a little bit more? And the risk that remote work could pose if we're not careful is that it might disproportionately affect populations who already struggle for equality in the workplace. Working moms are a prime example. Working moms need a little bit more flexibility in their workday. It's harder to commute, et cetera, et cetera. And so companies who make the very well-intentioned offer to choose to work remotely need to be careful, because that may backfire. Even though I applaud them for offering flexibility and choice, you've got to be careful, because if then the people who choose to come into the office more often tend to be, white men, and that is what the statistics are showing so far, and the ones who less frequently come into the office are the working moms, then you run the risk of proximity bias creeping in. And so you need to be careful as a leader, as an organization, to, first of all, be aware that proximity bias exists and that it may be subconscious. You may not even realize. I may not, right? That's the thing about subconscious bias, is that you don't realize it's happening, even if it is. And so we all need to be aware of the fact that we might be doing something that we don't even realize. And then the step 2 is putting together some processes, some checks and balances to prevent it from happening. And that is one of the things I'm so excited for with Radius, because we're increasing access to these types of spaces where you can see the boss and you can be
Hmm.
with your colleagues, you can deepen those relationships, your work can be seen, because proximity bias, we've evolved over millions of years to be together once in a while, right? So it's not
Hmm.
like we can completely ever eliminate it. And so why don't we also build bridges to make it easier for us to be together once in a while? And so that's one thing I'm very, very excited about with Radius.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me because yeah, it is true. Like if we're not conscious, if we're not self-aware, if we're not constantly learning how to be a better leader or provide this type of structure where if we are flexible, so some people are in the office, some people are not, some people are using Radius, like if we don't consciously think about it, then it goes over our head, especially white males, right? Like I'm not one to deny that, right? And so what I try to do, just for anybody listening, is I try to take in the inputs or insights of other people because I can only really know what my experiences are. But if I can read a book from a woman author who has a different perspective on something than me, or if I can listen to a podcast or have conversations like this and learn about things that I've never thought about, right?
Yeah,
That is how we move forward. And one of the things that we say, I'll say this and then you can jump in. One of the things that we say at Grapevine is flexibility needs structure too. And so that's what
sure.
we're trying to do is provide an infrastructure for remote and hybrid organizations where proximity bias is a little less prevalent, but I mean, obviously technology can only go so far. It has to involve the people too.
Yeah. But this is also what makes you so special, Zach, is because you are one of those people who values other perspectives, and you actually embrace the fact that you don't know everything
Yeah.
and put the effort in to fill those gaps. It's actually human nature to have confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And because certainty feels so much better than uncertainty. It's a survival mechanism, right?
Yeah.
If you're in uncertain territory, with your spear and, like back in our caveman days, right? If you were in an uncertain situation, that was like red flashing lights of danger.
Yeah.
Familiarity and confidence in one's situation is safe from a survival standpoint. And so fast forward to today, having a perspective and feeling certain in that perspective feels so much better
Hmm.
than admitting I may not have all the answers, and everything that I believe could actually be slightly wrong.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I could also be slightly wrong right now in that assertion, right? And it's really uncomfortable to say that, to believe that. But this is, to your point, how we grow, admitting we may not have all the answers, even if we think, especially when we think we do.
Yeah.
Being open to that, that is great leadership. That is what spurs innovation. That is what moves the world forward.
Yeah. 100%. Like whenever you were talking about that, I was thinking about Adam Grant's book, Think Again. And it's basically like you might have assumptions, you might even have knowledge, you might even have data backing it up. But like, unless you allow yourself to think again, then you aren't going to grow, you know? And so, yeah, speaking of that, I had like a flow, but I'm gonna go off of it because we're touching different points, and I wanna get them instead of try to force it. I want to get them where it makes sense. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump to remote work challenges because that's kind of what we're talking about here, and then specifically remote work leadership. So one of the questions that I had here is how do you perceive the evolution of remote leadership and what qualities do you consider crucial for remote leaders to succeed, particularly in fostering a thriving remote work culture that's connected and productive?
I love what you said about embracing some structure to the flexibility.
Hmm.
That's a really big one. And I recently had a conversation with a colleague of mine about the value of flexibility, offering people freedom, trusting them, treating them as adults, trusting them to come back to you and say, this is what I need.
Mm,
But not everybody knows what they need.
that's very true.
Not everybody has thought about it, because they came from a world where they just clocked in 9 to 5 and that was it. They
Yeah.
were told what they need
Yep.
versus having the autonomy to figure it out for themselves. Not to mention, there's some people that are fresh out of school. They don't even have years of experience to look back on to assess what their needs and preferences are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe that remote leadership requires a little bit of coaching in that regard, helping people reflect and introspect on their needs and their preferences, which then necessitates that those leaders be reflective and introspective themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and that they lead from a place of empathy, especially in the cases where they're speaking with people who are not like them, whose needs
Yeah.
and preferences differ. Right? We've all heard about those CEOs who are extroverts,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
and they couldn't ever imagine working in a remote environment where they are by themselves in their home office, cooped up doing Zoom calls. That's why they want people to come back to the office, so that they can be surrounded by people. Well, what about the introverts in the group?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so leading from a place of empathy, in the sense that you can put your feet in the shoes of somebody with an entirely different perspective and situation, is absolutely critical. That combined with the realization that leading a remote team is not just taking in-office policies, carbon copying them, and trying to apply them to remote context. It doesn't work. It does
Yeah.
require a change in leadership, and therefore effort to learn how to do it. The good news is, the information is out there. There are countless companies who have succeeded at this, who have been doing this since their inception, which was
Mm-hmm.
way before the pandemic ever happened. And a lot of those companies are being extremely vocal and generous
Mm-hmm.
by sharing resources on how to do this really well. So it's
Yeah.
out there. You just have to embrace it.
Yeah, the companies that come to my mind right now is Atlassian, GitLab.
Yep.
They started from
Big
inception, like you
ones.
were saying, 100% remote, just like you and I are. And yeah, I mean, yeah, Atlassian is, I mean, they have a playbook out there that you could follow and you can implement it into your organization. Or like you mentioned, there's consultants out there that's their entire business model, is how can I come in to this company and help them become better remote leaders? Because a remote leader is a different leader than just an in-person leader, in my
Yep.
opinion. And yeah, it's a mixture of understanding how to do process. It's a mixture of understanding how to motivate people from afar. It's a mixture of having that emotional intelligence. I know that you mentioned that those things are out there. Do you have like a specific like book or podcast or anybody on LinkedIn that, I know it's on the spot question, but do you have anybody that comes to mind, or a book or anything like that that people could go and explore that could help them?
There are just so many. There are
Yeah,
so
that's
many
true.
that are
Do a
flooding
little
my
Google.
brain right now. Some of the books I have back there, but I think my biggest recommendation is to start joining those remote leadership groups. There are LinkedIn
Mm,
groups that have a lot of these experts and these leaders who are leading by example, and sharing their practices. Start joining some of those groups if you haven't had exposure yet,
mhm.
because what you're going to learn there and the recommendations that you get for people to follow and books to read are going to be far more comprehensive than if I just gave you like one or two examples here.
That's true, and it has to meet you where you are too, because
Exactly.
if you get one and it's like Clayton Christensen's like what is it, the innovators deliver, I can't talk, dilemma, that's a very deep book, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you want to start with something that's getting you at least accepting remote work or flexible
Yeah.
work.
Hmm.
I want to stay on the topic of remote work challenges just for a little bit. But so in your extensive entrepreneurial journey, because in the intro we talked about a lot of the things that you've done. You're a serial entrepreneur. What are some of the common challenges individuals and organizations face when transitioning to remote work or flexible arrangements, and how do you recommend them overcoming that in the context of Radius's flexible model, or just in general from your own experience?
I have had the privilege of running teams that were both fully in office and now fully remote with intentional gathering.
Hmm.
And it really is completely different. Of course, there are some principles that,
Yeah.
humans are humans wherever they are, right? But in building Radius, we've had some of our own challenges in figuring out how to lean into that autonomy and freedom
Yeah.
without it feeling like a chaotic free for all where we don't
Yeah.
know where people are or when they're available. And we have run into some challenges where, let's say we get a last minute request from a customer and it's going to require a team effort.
Hmm.
And there were moments where we were like, "Oh, well, where's this person? Is this person on Slack?
Yeah.
Are they off for the rest of the day?" Or, because the expectation hadn't been set.
Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
the beginning, it was just, work when you want, choose your own hours. We don't really care when you work as long as it gets done.
Yeah.
That's all really that matters at the end of the day. But there are some moments inevitably where synchronizing our time is absolutely required to get the task done.
Hmm.
And so we ended up having conversations, team level agreements, and starting to put frameworks around that freedom, like you were saying before, so that, sure, if you need to take your kid to the orthodontist on Monday between 2 and 3,
Hmm.
great, do it.
Yeah.
But maybe mark your calendar or mark your Slack status or give us some
Yeah.
sort of notice so that we can, first of all, know that you are unavailable. That way you can feel, completely guilt free, and you know
Yeah.
that we're not going to bother you. But at the same time, if your expertise was needed, we can either get it before or after, and we can plan for your absence.
Yeah.
And in some regards, you could argue that that infringes on freedom a little bit because now you have to let people know. But you know what? That's also how life works. Like when you leave your family for the day, you probably let them know, hey, I'm probably going to be gone for X number of hours. Expect me at
Yeah.
this time, right? It's just kind of common courtesy. And so we've found that building in those politeness frameworks into our flexibility has really gone a long way. And now those expectations can be met.
Yeah, and to me, it's being proactive instead of reactive. And one of the reasons that I like remote work so much is, and I mentioned this on several different other podcasts, so people might who listen probably are tired of me saying it, but it is still true. Um, it doesn't allow you to just get by anymore. Where I think in the office, there's a lot of slack that happens, not the tool, but like slack in the sense of if I'm a leader, I don't necessarily have to formulate these clear communication outlines or to say, hey, if you're leaving, make sure that you do XYZ or let us know, right? Because they can pop in and say, hey, Amina, I'm going to be leaving I mean, I was going to say go get my haircut, but if you did that in the office, they would look at you and say, what is wrong with you? Like, we can't go get your haircut in the middle of the day. But let's say a doctor's visit, right?
Sure.
And then I would just say like, hey, these are the things that I got going on. I told Amina she's going to look after this while I'm gone. In a remote working world, you can't just let it happen or just get by. You have to be very
Hmm.
specific. And whenever I talk to other remote work experts, or practitioners, they've mentioned about like a communications charter. So how do we communicate? If it's emergency, where do we communicate? If you are going to be out of the office, put up a status, let people know, put it at the end of your signature for external people. And so and in Grapevine specifically, we are trying to solve for this. I know I keep talking about Grapevine, but we're trying to solve for this where we have an on off button, whether you're in the office or out of the office. And the office doesn't mean physical. It means, are you working today or not? And honestly, now that I say that, maybe we should change that lingo. But one of the things that I would like, I don't know if it goes into this topic or not, but I'll say it and you can tell me your thoughts. One of the things that I would like is if you are off, then it turns off all the notifications and you can actually embrace being off of work. So I don't know if you have any takes on that, or if that even made sense.
It did. And there are certainly moments where I turn my notifications off, like for example, for sleep. Like if I'm sleeping, I am not working. I might wake up at 3 a.m. with an idea that I need to jot down, and that happens a little more frequently than I would like it to.
I understand.
But I am not responding to work emails that come in at 2 a.m. just because it came in. So I shut off all my notifications for that. However, as a startup founder, even on the days where I'm disconnecting, I tend to keep my notifications on in case there is a fire that needs putting out. If I need to disconnect fully, then I let my co-founder and at least one other teammate, hey, this is a day where I need to fully shut off. I'm turning off my notifications. I might even put an autoresponder on saying, if it's an emergency, please get in touch with so-and-so. Is that cool with you for you to kind of pick that up for me? And they have. And then I can fully disconnect even if some kind of a fire comes in. Now, of course, I'm a founder, and that is a unique situation to be in. Not everybody is in that. I think it's very, very healthy to disconnect. I was just having a conversation yesterday about how I do my best thinking in the shower. I mean, it turns out that is way more common than I thought. It's when we relax, when we let our brains wander, when we're not supposed to be working, that some of our most genius ideas hit us. But also, it's just healthy to disconnect. And it's healthy to be a multifaceted human being. And so once in a while, I think you've got to shut off your notifications and just be who you are outside of work.
So you're probably like me, like you would preach this for your employees, but you also know that as a founder, you have to sacrifice a little bit or a lot depending on how you look at it. But it kind of so I did have an extra question that I didn't know if we were going to get to or not, but I know that achieving work-life balance is often a concern in the remote work setup. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but just to get a little bit more perspective, how do you personally manage to establish boundaries between work and personal life? And what advice do you have for others struggling with this? Or do you feel like you found that balance yet? Or do you not believe in work-life balance? Because I don't know if I really do.
Work-life balance in a remote context is a bit of a double-edged sword, in my view. Because on one hand, if you don't have a commute, then you can take that time back and own it in whatever ways you want. And if you can set your own schedule and work asynchronously, then you may be able to integrate the rest of your life with work and vice versa more intentionally and with more freedom. At the same time, if your primary location of work is your home, then it's kind of hard to get work-life separation because you are living at the office. Working from home is living at the office. So for many people, it can be difficult to disconnect at the end of the day. So there are pros and cons.
True.
So one thing is, I know that for me, we live in a 2-bedroom house. One of those bedrooms is my office. And
Mhm.
my partner has been very, very generous to make our living area his office.
Oh, nice.
And I don't think he has as healthy work-life separation because of it as I
Mhm.
do. Because
Yeah.
I have my work area, and then when I'm not working, I leave it. I run out of this room and I don't come back into it unless I'm working, so that I can have those clear boundaries. He doesn't have as clear boundaries because his desk is in the same room as where we watch movies on,
Yeah.
on a weekend. And so it's a little bit harder for him. And so for those people who live in big enough houses where you can create that work-life separation physically, do it. But
Mhm.
if you live in a smaller space, perhaps you have other family members, you have kids, you need to create a little bit of boundary, but you don't have the luxury of that in your own house,
Yeah.
then go find a way to go somewhere else on the days when
Mhm.
you need it. And make sure that your employer embraces that sort of flexibility and gives you options that are beyond just going to a coffee shop, because a coffee shop can also be distracting in other ways. For
Mhm.
some people love it, some people hate it. And so again, a diversity of needs requires a diversity of solutions.
Yeah, and that's the power of flexibility, right? It
Yeah.
because I think whenever we talk about the future of work, a lot, or specifically remote work, a lot of people are construing that remote work is work from home, and it's not.
Yeah.
It just means that we are not working in the office, and flexibility means that the employee has an option, a choice, right? And so I think that that's something. It kind of tailors into, or segues into, the question that I want to ask you for the future looking
Sure.
trends.
But
Um,
but before you
yeah,
do, if I may just comment on what you
yeah,
said
yeah.
about how working from home and remote work are not synonyms, this is a huge point that
Mhm.
I feel like the world really needs to pay more attention to,
Yeah,
because they were synonyms during the pandemic,
they
because
what?
the
Yeah,
home was the only
exactly.
place to go,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But post pandemic, they are absolutely not synonyms. Working from home is just one facet of an umbrella term that is remote work. Why
Hmm.
this is so important is that a lot of leaders, a lot of companies, they look at work from home, they see the pros, they see the cons, and they apply those to remote work as a whole. And when they
Yeah,
look at the cons of working from home, the potential for feelings of isolation, the distractions, the lack of work-life separation, and potential for burnout, these are all things that are absolutely pain points of working from home for a good amount of people. Not for everyone, but they
yeah.
are there. But if you generalize those pain points to remote work as a whole, because you see them as synonymous incorrectly,
Hmm.
and then you throw your hands up and say, well, remote work doesn't work, it's not sustainable because it has all of these downsides, well, you're missing the big picture and you're leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. So we need to hammer this point home, that they are
Yeah,
not the same thing, and that remote work actually enables all of the benefits of a traditional office and all of the benefits of working from home,
yeah.
with far fewer downsides if you just open your mind.
I couldn't agree more. It kind of already answers the question that I was going to ask, because I was going to say, do you think we are ignoring anything as a collective whole when it comes to the future of work? And I think that's one of the answers.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you see that we're ignoring or just overlooking? Maybe there's probably a lot, but
I mean, there really is a lot, but I would say that we have a terminology problem
Hmm,
overall. We
yeah.
use terms like working from home and remote work interchangeably.
Hmm.
And there are several other terms that that we're starting to get confusion around because we're not paying attention to the nuances that differentiate them. And I do think
Yeah.
that we need to do a better job to make sure that we're actually talking about the same things. Like, for example, structured hybrid
Hmm.
or forced hybrid
Yeah.
is a very different beast than the sort of hybrid models that allow for 100% choice. But we
Yeah.
just call them hybrid a
That
lot of
is very
times.
true. Yeah.
And so, are there mandates? Are there mandates for the number of days? For which days? Right? There's so
Mhm.
many ways to look at it, but we just lump these things into one term, hybrid. And so, what are we
Yeah.
actually talking about? So, before we have any sort of conversation, I think it's important for all the stakeholders in that conversation to first align on what exactly we're talking about and then proceed with the conversation versus just diving in.
Yeah. And what's ironic or funny maybe is that even though we didn't use the word or the term remote work for the longest time, these large organizations, I used to work at a company called TIA Cref as a management consultant, and we had several different buildings and different areas in different states. And
Mm-hmm.
that's remote working because you're not working right next to the person. And so
Sure.
if that worked, how does remote work not work? Right?
Yeah.
Make it
Yeah.
make sense.
Yeah, and I can't remember who else said this, but they were like, if you're working more than 30 feet away from your coworker, even if it's in the same office building, yeah, you're working remotely. And
Yeah.
now a counter argument that some employers make is, yeah, but if you're on the same floor, then you're going to have water cooler moments. You're going to have serendipitous interactions and accidental innovation.
Yeah.
To which I push back saying, yeah, but do you really want to grow your culture based on accidents? Or do you want to be
Yeah.
intentional about it and create opportunities for people to have that innovation, possibly serendipitously, but in a
Mhm.
way that doesn't feel like, maybe it'll happen today. Like, let's
Yeah.
put something or something a little more structured around this so that people feel a sense of empowerment about it.
Yeah, exactly. Grapevine, we're gonna have a virtual office break room, and so whenever you click on the icon, like if I click the icon, you would get a notification saying Zach has entered the break room, and technically
Mm.
that's spontaneity, right? And so there's ways to go about this. It's the way that I put it in perspective is we've had the longest time developing in office structures, frameworks, methodology. We're just getting started on flexible work, distributed work, remote
Yeah.
work. And so, like people like us, we're hopefully building that framework for others to adopt. And obviously, like GitLab and Atlassian are years ahead of me specifically. And so, we can look at them and adopt and then maybe even do better than they did. And then
Hmm.
now we have that terminology, we have that framework because we were able to help shape the future of work. So
Yep. Yep.
yeah. Okay. I
Yep.
know you got to go. We are going to do a lightning round, and this might be the first time that it was actually lightning because you don't have much time. So, okay. Coffee or tea for those early morning Zoom meetings?
For me,
Yeah.
decaf coffee.
Oh, really? Okay. I won't add any comments because we don't have time.
I don't need more stimulation in my life. I'm a startup founder. I don't need more stressors. So I've gone
See,
decaf.
yeah, wow. I have to drink the caffeine. Probably too much. Okay. Favorite remote work playlist or music genre that you put on in the background?
Can't do it. I'm
Oh,
an
really?
introvert. And introverts are more sensitive to external stimuli like that. And so I need
Mm.
100% quiet to do focused work. So I listen to music in the car, but
Oh, okay.
not while I'm working. Can't do it.
That's interesting because we used to always have music on in my first job that I worked in, and thinking about how other people work is very important, and I wasn't even thinking about it at the time. Luckily,
Nope.
I've grown and evolved. Um, okay, most creative location you've worked from remotely?
Ooh.
I think the answer is
I
anywhere on Radius. No, I'm just kidding.
well, there is one particular Radius space that is coming to mind, and
Mm.
it is a conference yurt.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Uh, it has all of the amenities of a conference room. So it has, it has AV, a meeting table, whiteboard, so everything that you would expect in a traditional conference room, but it's a yurt. And here's the kicker: it's on an alpaca farm.
Oh,
And
that's pretty
so
cool.
if you bring a team to do a strategy meeting or just to co-work together as a team,
Yeah.
then during lunch or your coffee breaks, bring a big bag of apples
Oh
and go out
man.
and feed the animals. And I mean, it's just so cool to be in a space that, like, you walk in, you're like, I did not
Yeah.
expect a space like this to ever be conducive to work, but holy crap, this is
Wow.
awesome. And then have the outdoor space, have like farm animals right next to you. And
Yeah.
it's just like, that is what excites me about the future of work,
Yeah.
is the idea that it doesn't have to be in a boring white box anymore. It doesn't have to be far away. It doesn't have to be cookie cutter. It can be anything you want it to be.
That is all. I'm gonna have to look at that. I'm gonna find that one. Um,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Like, when's the last time you could say, "Hey, I worked with alpacas"? Not with them, but beside them today.
Yeah. They were your
um,
work colleagues at the time.
exactly. My work colleague every day is our golden doodle, so just kind of like an alpaca a little bit.
Also wonderful.
Okay, one essential tool or app for remote productivity.
Mm. I mean, I really do think you need a suite. There
Mm,
isn't one that really stands out. I will say that like, our team does most communication over Slack, and
mhm.
most of the time it's asynchronous.
Yep.
And then we use Zoom for when we need to synchronize in a remote way. But goodness, we use a lot, and
Yeah.
one could argue that there's opportunity in that space to consolidate tools, so you didn't have to use 100 different things.
Yep.
Um, but uh, but yeah, so far it's working.
Good. Maybe we'll get Grapevine in there at some point, because that is our goal, to consolidate as much as
Yeah.
possible.
Well,
Speaking
I
of
love what I've
Zoom,
been hearing about it.
hey, we'll maybe we'll get another meeting offline.
Sounds
How
good.
do you combat Zoom fatigue?
Hmm. I am not sure that I really get fatigued
Okay, it's
from
because you don't
Zoom
drink
as a
caffeine.
platform. Well, there is that. Yeah. I really like talking to people when it's when the conversation has depth. What I
Yes.
find exhausting is surface level small talk, whether it's on Zoom or in
Anyway.
person. I mean, it feels like a waste of time to not go deeper. And that
Yeah.
to me is exhausting. And like pretending to be interested in something that is so surface level that it doesn't really matter. That's what tires me. Being on Zoom and having a conversation like this, that fuels me, even as an introvert.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. 100% agree. We have one more minute. Let's see if we can go through. I think we have three more. Okay.
Sounds good.
Remote work pet peeve. What drives you crazy?
Oh, going back to what we were talking about before, when people confuse remote work with working from home, thinking they're synonyms, that is my biggest pet peeve, because it's not just inconvenient, it has the potential for huge consequences for people and the companies that they work for.
Yeah,
Gotta fix it.
it could really be detrimental to bettering work in the future. So
Yeah.
I agree with that. I like that one. Describe your dream virtual team building activity.
Hmm.
It could be one that you've done or you haven't done yet, or that you just heard about.
Right now, every other Friday, we hop on Google Meets as a team, and it's just anybody who can and wants to come, and we call them radiator hangs. Our demonym
Oh,
is we are all radiators internally.
I like that.
And it's just a radiator hang. And during the last one, we talked about taxidermy. We also talked about veganism. Ironically,
Okay.
a little bit. We just talk about random things that we're dealing with or that we found that was interesting. And we just banter
Yeah.
and we come as we go. And there's no real agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a way for us to get to know each other and deepen our friendships because
Yeah.
we're friends. We've been in the trenches together. We're not just coworkers. We've become friends. And it's little things like that that go a long way.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna stop right there because I like that answer to end on, because those are the things that whenever people say that remote work doesn't work or you can't build relationships, it's because you're doing it wrong. Like, you need to
Yeah,
have these types of conversations that sometimes doesn't have anything to do with your business, but it has
totally.
everything to do with building your community, your culture. Like you said, be intentional about building your culture. So
Yeah.
I'll stop there because I know that I've already ran out of time. Amina, thank you so much for being a part of the Untangled Vines community. And I'm so excited to get this out there to our listeners.
Me too. This was really fun, Zach. Thank you.
Thank you.